Tell me what it is you are. What are you?
Welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. Moon Knight just started, and we're already getting hints about what's going to come next. In a few recent interviews, Oscar Isaac spoke about where we might see Moon Knight show up next, and that is the Midnight Suns, a team of cursed anti-heroes who battle against the forces of darkness.
So exciting.
The MCU has been delving into the supernatural recently, like with the introduction of Blade.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
And the events of Moon Knight are sure to point to a potential crossover between some badass dark anti-heroes. So we have to talk about the potential of the MCU's Midnight Suns, which characters will be a part of it, and what supernatural forces are going to bring them all together.
Midnight Suns.
Sí.
Imagínate,
Oh,
imagínate
tú
con
sabes.
Midnight Suns, con Punisher, con
Yeah.
Ghost Rider, y Daredevil, Blade.
That interview from Strip Marvel with Oscar Isaac is a good sign that the MCU is planning the Midnight Suns, and the seeds are already planted. Moon Knight dives deep into the supernatural. WandaVision introduced us to witches and dark magic. Then there's the introduction of Blade in the Eternals, and the Daywalker and Black Knight will probably team up in Blade's movie. And finally, Werewolf by Night is getting a Disney Plus special. All of these things are very likely building toward a Midnight Suns crossover. And what do all of these characters have in common? They're all cursed and damned with strong ties to the supernatural. Moon Knight is possessed by a vengeful god. Blade is a vampire. Black Knight wields the Ebony Blade, which is a cursed magical sword. And Werewolf by Night is he's a werewolf.
No shit.
Throw in some other cursed anti-heroes like Ghost Rider and, you got yourself a delicious team of supernatural badasses.
That's some badass shit.
It's pretty badass.
And that's really the great thing about the Midnight Suns in the comics. They are all anti-heroes. All of them are connected to evil supernatural forces. They all chose to fight the kind of evil the Avengers are not equipped to deal with.
What, you amateurs are supposed to be helping me? You're not ready to roll with this? I mean, look at the way you dressed. The f is wrong with you? You think this is a joke? You think this is a fucking sitcom?
And come on, are you kidding me? Look at this. This needs to happen in the MCU. So before we talk about why the Midnight Suns will assemble and what evil dark force they will be fighting against, let's talk about who should be part of the MCU's team.
Let's ride.
Obviously, we have to start with Moon Knight. While Moon Knight's usual adversaries are criminals, over the years he's faced all sorts of supernatural beings, from vampires to ghosts to even gods. And the MCU's Moon Knight is leaning heavily into the supernatural. So that makes Moon Knight into a key player in the dark mystical side of the MCU. Next up, Blade. I totally see Blade as a type of Nick Fury for this team. Blade being the leader makes total sense. He spent the better part of a century hunting vampires and battling all types of things that go bump in the night. He is the expert monster slayer, making him the natural leader of the team. Now in the comics, it was Doctor Strange who formed the team, but, I mean, come on, he's got his hands full with the multiverse right now. And we already know that Blade is recruiting the team as he started with Dane Whitman.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
Now, traditionally, Black Knight is not part of the Midnight Suns, but he does have ties to the supernatural. So the sword that Dane Whitman is looking at the end of the Eternals is called the Ebony Blade. It's a very powerful magic sword, the type of weapon you need to fight supernatural enemies that the Midnight Suns are going to face. The TLDR on the Ebony Blade is, hundreds of years ago, Merlin carved it from a meteorite, and it bears a curse that will essentially bring the worst out in its user, and it's been passed down from Dane Whitman's ancestors all the way to him. Blade will be Dane's mentor as he learns to control the Ebony Blade and become the Black Knight. Now, Blade and Black Knight teamed up in the comics as part of MI-13. They and other British heroes fought against Dracula's vampire uprising, and something like that would be a great story for a Blade movie or even the Midnight Suns. Also, since Blade started recruiting, I wouldn't be surprised if Blade cameos in the show to invite Mark or Steven to join the team. Next up is Werewolf by Night. Now, we don't know much about what Marvel is planning for him, but having a powerful werewolf on a team of supernatural anti-heroes is a must. Just like the Avengers had the Hulk,
We have a Hulk.
the character who went crazy that you couldn't trust, this team will have the werewolf, the person you're not sure when he's going to come unhinged or if he can control the monster inside of him. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite, one of the most badass and beloved Marvel anti-heroes of all time, Ghost Rider. They gotta give us Ghost Rider in the Midnight Suns. So one question about Ghost Rider is, which one do you use? Cause there are so many of them. The MCU actually already has a Ghost Rider, and that's Robbie Reyes, who was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, considering that they are bringing in more and more of the show's characters into the main continuity, it makes sense to use that version of Ghost Rider because fans really like him. But that said, I would prefer Johnny Blaze to be the Ghost Rider that we see in Midnight Suns. He's the fan favorite spirit of vengeance, and that's the Ghost Rider that should ride into the MCU. Also, with all the multiverse craziness, we might see Nick Cage return, and that would be just awesome. Then there's Elsa Bloodstone. Now, she's not in the MCU yet, and there are no hints of her showing up yet, but if they are doing Midnight Suns, Elsa Bloodstone is a perfect fit for the team. She was trained to be the ultimate badass monster hunter, basically from her birth. The Bloodstones are a rich and powerful family of monster hunters, so that makes Elsa into an interesting counterpart to Blade. Blade is more of a do-it-yourself vampire slayer, while Elsa is effectively, what if Batman was a monster slayer?
This one has cheated us many times. It is vexing.
Boo.
So this dynamic between the two Slayers could lead to some great interactions. And that also goes for the rest of the team. How will all of these anti-heroes bounce off each other? Because none of them is a team player. The Avengers might fight each other from time to time, but they're all good guys and heroes. The Midnight Suns are a team of loners who are more likely to attempt to kill or hunt each other than work together.
Are you out of your damn mind?
And next up, we have to talk about a more questionable member of the team. Marvel Studios announced that Agatha Harkness is getting her own show.
It's been Agatha all along.
Now, since Agatha is a villainous witch, she's going to get a redemption arc in her spinoff, and that makes her into an anti-hero. A powerful witch that turned to evil after her own mother wanted to burn her at the stake.
Please, I can be good.
No, you cannot. She's kind of cursed and damaged, just like the other members of the Midnight Suns. Plus, the team needs a mystical expert, and Agatha fits that role.
You're gonna need me.
And because she was evil for about 300 years, that makes her the wild card of the team. She's the witch but no one trusts, but they're all forced to work with her out of necessity. Agatha might help the team and at the same time betray them and join forces with the villains. So here's who I see being part of the Midnight Suns. Moon Knight, Blade, Black Knight, Ghost Rider, Werewolf by Night, all a done deal. Agatha, very likely, and Elsa Bloodstone should absolutely join the team as well. Of course, there are many other supernatural anti-heroes who could also end up on this team. Like Morbius. Like Morbius. Yeah, that ain't gonna happen. Now, I'm sure you are asking, but what about Daredevil and Punisher? Well, Oscar Isaac mentioned both of them as potential members of the team. But I'm unsure how they fit into the supernatural direction, since they both deal mainly with street-level criminals. Now, that being said, both Daredevil and Punisher had run-ins with mythical foes, so it could still work. And I sure won't complain if this will be the MCU's Midnight Suns.
Wagwan! I did it! You got planted!
Now, while Daredevil and Punisher could work, I don't want to see Doctor Strange or Wanda join the team. They are Avengers. They deal with big picture stuff like the multiverse crisis. Midnight Suns should be rough, dark, and gritty. They are not kid-friendly. They are not clean like the Avengers. They're a collection of cursed and damaged people who aren't afraid to delve into the darkest corners of the world, battle the dwellers of the dark, because they are part of that same darkness. That being said, Wanda could actually be the reason why the Midnight Suns joined forces.
You have no idea what you've unleashed.
And that brings us to the villain the Midnight Suns will assemble against. Now, considering the Eternals post-credits scene, Blade is recruiting the Midnight Suns. But why now? He's been hunting vampires for decades all on his own. So what has changed in the world that the Daywalker needs help? The events of the Eternals take place in 2024. About a year before that, in 2023, 3 weeks after Endgame, Wanda Maximoff unlocked her chaos magic and became the Scarlet Witch. And this was like a magical shockwave that every supernatural being in the world could sense.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force.
Remember what Agatha said about the Scarlet Witch?
It's your destiny to destroy the world.
The Scarlet Witch's emergence is a sign for the end times, a signal for the dwellers of the darkness to unleash their evil on the world. There's also the Darkhold, which is the source of dark magic, and the Scarlet Witch has this book. Based on the trailers of Multiverse of Madness, that darkness will be unleashed, and all of that chaos magic will surely have an effect on the rest of the world.
Oh God, you don't know what you've done.
And all of this evil is fuel for one powerful demonic being, the Thanos of the supernatural, Mephisto. Evil on Earth is like fuel for Mephisto, and with so much of it rising from the shadows, that's a feast for the demonic being. So yes, the big baddie that the Midnight Suns will assemble against needs to be Mephisto. Midnight Suns is the natural story to introduce Mephisto into the MCU, and he's also the ideal antagonist for the team. He's connected to Ghost Rider since he created him. Midnight Suns is the story where Mephisto can actually be the real villain and not some like Easter egg or a fan theory.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast!
And just imagine this, the Midnight Suns travel into Mephisto's hellish realm as they cut through an army of monsters just to fight Mephisto himself right on his home turf. Now that is a movie I would watch on day one.
Shut up and take my money!
Come to think of it, Wanda might still be part of the Midnight Suns in some capacity. Right now, it's unclear when and if we will see the Midnight Suns, since we're talking like at least 2 or 3 years away from the team getting their own movie or show. And we don't know what's in store for Wanda after the Multiverse of Madness. Now it's possible that her mental state will only get worse after the events of the movie, making her far more unstable and dangerous. That makes her a cataclysmic threat to the world and actually all of reality. Wanda's chaotic state will be exploited by Mephisto, and that combination is basically one of the biggest threats to all existence. Doctor Strange could end up recruiting the Midnight Suns to stop Mephisto and prevent him from taking control of Wanda. And it could be about saving Wanda or even trying to kill her to save the world.
Let's be real about one thing. I don't expect everybody to make it back tomorrow. Remember to protect yourselves at all times.
Now Mephisto might be too big of a villain for the Midnight Suns, at least on their first team up. Maybe that first crossover threat should be a little less apocalyptic. That's one of the things I hope Marvel does with the Midnight Suns, keep them a little more down to earth. Especially because way too many recent MCU movies were about the world or even the universe ending. So instead of saving the whole world, maybe it can be a smaller and more personal threat. The evil being that brings the Midnight Suns together could be Lilith, the mother of all demons. She was the reason why the Midnight Suns originally assembled in the comics, and that could also be the story the MCU follows. Thing is that Lilith is an evil goddess whose followers free her from an ancient imprisonment to unleash her evil on the world. Moon Knight is basically already doing the same thing with Ammit. So they're going to have to make some changes to Lilith's story, so it's not just a rehash. But I would much prefer to have a different villain for the Midnight Suns, and that is Dracula.
You gotta be kidding me.
So there was a story where Dracula united an army of vampires in the purpose of conquering the United Kingdom. This led to a clash between Dracula's army and MI-13, a team that Blade and Black Knight were a part of. A version of this story could work as the Midnight Suns' first mission. Now regardless of who's going to be the villain, Midnight Suns needs to happen in the MCU. This is the way to explore the dark supernatural corners of the Marvel Universe. The team has so much potential for badass stories, and because of their anti-hero nature, it can also be a way for Marvel to explore far darker tales. So hopefully, the events of Moon Knight are one of the first steps that will take us to the Midnight Suns.
Get you later.
So do you think that Marvel is assembling the Midnight Suns? Which characters do you hope to see on the team? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.